Hello, and welcome to my YouTube channel, Reading Little Blue Books out loud while stoned. Today we're going to do part 4 of Little Blue Book number 467, titled Evolution Made Plain, written by John Mason. And here we go. This writer is speaking largely from his own mental experience. He, like his opponent, absorbed orthodox theology along with political stand-patism and a few other safe and sane isms from his early environment. My opponent, like most others, never thought of questioning the truth of those beliefs, but left them undisturbed until they fossilized. On the other hand, some of us, perhaps because of a radical twist in our mental makeup, set ourselves to examining those hand-me-down beliefs and found some of them lacking in some important essentials. Having changed sides on one or more important questions, we naturally lost faith in the more or less popular theory that because of an idea is old or is held by a majority of the people, it must therefore necessarily be true. That is the extent of this writer's sponginess. As a rule, when we have learned that we have absorbed most of our political, religious, and other early opinions from our environment through the pores of our skin, we become less cocksure. We have a monopoly on truth. As a rule, latitude and longitude instead of reason shapes our opinions on the most important issues. We are generally Protestants, Catholics, Mohammedans, Confucians, Monarchists, Democrats or Republicans, according to whether we happen to be born and reared in Spain, Turkey, China, Mississippi, or Vermont. An old English philosopher says, "Men have always thought and believed in masses. Throughout the whole earth you may observe opinions and ideas like swarms of bees, clustering together upon particular spots, or as if, like certain trees and plants, they were indigenous to the soil." Another writer says, "Men think in packs, as jackals hunt." A young minister exclaims, "There is a gulf between man and the inferior animals which no amount of sophistry, atlas, science can ever bridge. There is more than a missing link, 1,000 links. Man differs from animals in mental faculties. Lower animals cannot originate an idea. If man were evolved from a beast, where did he get his soul? You cannot say it evolved too. There was a definite hour, when man, possessing an immortal spirit, walked this earth, or else man is yet a beast. If the soul was slowly evolved, and if that long-tailed monkey, who squatted upon the lower branches of your ancestral tree, had a piece of a soul, and you should meet that poor little piece of a soul in the future land of spirits, wouldn't you be sorter shamed on the morning after the resurrection to walk up to it and say, 'Howdy, Grandpa'? You may boast that your grandfather was a monkey, your great-grandfather a bullfrog, and your great-great-grandfather a wiggletail, but I claim for mine no such lustrous ancestry." Well, that settles it. To save our pride, or our vanity rather, I suppose, we'll have to shut our eyes to the evidence and reject evolution. After all, perhaps the world's greatest thinkers have been following the wrong trail in the pursuit of truth. Instead of weighing the evidence for and against a theory, they should have adopted the infinitely simpler plan of deciding it according to whether or not we like it. All anti-evolutionists find it necessary to appeal to our pride of ancestry, to hold us to an ancient dogma. Even Mr. Bryan regards this appeal to petty personal vanity as legitimate argument against evolution. How they hate to give up the ennobling idea that we are the degraded descendants of a perfect godlike pair. Are the lower animals so very inferior to man because, as my friend says, they cannot originate an idea? Lots of us higher animals could plead guilty to the same charge. And what is worse, 2 or 3 generations must pass before the majority of us will ever seriously consider an idea someone else originated, even when all the facts are for and none against it. It is not necessary to bridge every gulf between man and amoeba to prove evolution. If all gaps between species were filled with links as thick as down on a goose's feather, then all creatures from Shakespeare to angleworms would belong to the same species. In that case, all animals would be either poets or fish bait. I know of no reason why man evolved from a lower mammal could not have acquired a soul just as easily as if he were fashioned directly from a patch of mud. And I infer from that sublime paragraph of my revered friend's closing with the touching salutation, "Howdy, Grandpa. Whoopee!" that his idea of heaven is that it is just about as stagnant a place as he believes this world to be. May not poor little stunted souls, if there are such there, be permitted to unfold and develop in the general environment of the realm of the blessed? My opponent seems to be perturbed in regard to the exact period in the development of the race, the definite hour when man became into possession of a soul. To this question, let us apply cold, merciless logic. The historic history of the human race is recapitulated in the embryonic life of each individual. There are no difficulties in the way of determining at what precise period the soul was injected into the race man that are not also met in regard to the individual. My reverend friend, can you point out the definite hour, why not definite minute or second, when in your embryonic development you became possessed of a soul? And just 3 seconds before that event, were you not in as woefully a plight as any soulless monkey that ever cooled himself by swinging to and fro, suspended from a leafy bough by means of his prehensile caudal appendage? It is not possible that a little bit of envy of that large-souled race of the future does not mingle with your shame of an animal ancestry when you rise and exclaim, "Away with the theory of the upward trend in God's works. I will none of it." For it is a fact that whatever sense of shame one may feel for our lowly ancestors, it is more than compensated for by the pride one may feel for the noble race that is to be, because if the path along which we have traveled in past ages points downward in the rear, it just as surely points upward in front. Our destiny will be as high as our origin was low. And as man drops his foolish prejudices and grows more intelligent as he learns more about the laws of his development, the more rapidly will be the advance physically, mentally, spiritually. Ah, parson, far better to be the tadpole ancestor of an ever-progressive angle breed than to be denigrated descendant of a race of gods, yet a race without hope of ever again reaching the much-lauded pristine purity and perfection of Adam. A creature really whose moral status was so low and who was so weak that he fell at the first temptation. Civilization, culture, the moral nature of man have been developed. They are not the remains of something that has been lost. Human nature is not ruined, but is unfinished. The godlike race is not of the past, but belongs to the future. Man entered the zone of sin not from above, but from below. Probably no man who ever walked this earth, save Jesus Christ, has ever breathed the pure mortal atmosphere above the zone of sin, Through this zone, from the pre-human to the man of Galilee, from the sinless state of the lower animals and of the child man to the sinless perfection of the divine, the whole race, mid struggles and trials and sorrows and anguish, must pass, is passing. Natural selection and future process. Next chapter. Every truth man has discovered, every sound moral precept is rooted in nature. She is the rough model to be followed by man if his institutions are to endure. He goes wrong when he opposes her laws. He is right when he is in agreement with her. Refining away her crudeness, man creates nothing. He can only imitate, often poorly. He boasts of his works. Really, they are the product of nature, working through him, using him as an instrument. We have seen that nature does not hesitate to destroy the individual, if the species to which it belongs is thereby benefited. She looks beyond the present generation to the welfare of the race that is to be, thus teaching us the highest morality we can know, the broadest religion, i.e., that the good of the race, the common good, is all important, and that the individual should willingly sacrifice his labor, his life, when the good of humanity demands it. Jesus Christ, Socrates, and a host of less known martyrs have proven their devotion to the common good by making the supreme sacrifice. In so doing, they have hewn to the line, chalked out by Mother Nature, eons ago when inorganic matter first felt the stir of life. Jesus was announcing this principle when he said, "For whosoever will save his life, strive for self alone, shall lose it. And whosoever will lose his life for my sake and the sake of humanity, which Jesus himself valued higher than his own life, shall find it." Though only a few will have occasion to suffer martyrdom, the call to all of us is to live the life of unselfishness, be the end what it may. To live for the race is just as noble, if less dramatic, as to die for it. Thus we find that nature's most vital principle is in perfect accord with the profoundest religious truths. We have been taught that nature is cruel, that her hands are red with the blood of the innocent. But this idea was born of ignorant short-sightedness. We could not see beyond the outward act of the underlying law and its results. For man so to shape, that's damn words are disappearing on this page again, deeds as to be in harmony with the great law of natural selection and with the fundamental principle of religion, does not mean self-effacement. The suppression of individuality, on the contrary, it means self-development, individuality in the best sense. As a species or a race is composed of individuals, the more highly developed are the individuals, the greater the species. Self-development is the growth of the individual out of narrow selfishness and in accord with the laws of human sentiment. Selfishness expanded, refined, and absorbed becomes altruism, the love of oneself. That the selfish person defeats his own ends, cheats himself, is a truism. Only the unselfish person, holding humanity dearer than his own self, enjoys to the fullest all that belongs to selfhood. For he alone has the capacity for real enjoyment, or deserves it. The supremely selfish, the criminal, the grafter, the one who seeks to profit in any way at the expense of others, stands in the same relation to his race as the inferior animal to its species. He pulls down the average of the race and is at cross purposes with nature. To condone in oneself any of the many forms of selfishness, whether it be greed, theft, lying, lust, or vanity, is to put oneself in the same class with those defective wound creatures which nature ruthlessly destroys. Print's kind of bad on these pages. When a great ethical doctrine is grounded on a scientific basis, it becomes doubly convincing. Let the whole truth in regard to each individual's duty to the race be taught. The scientific half of it, along with the emotional, realistic half. No one who feels the full force of this truth will, in order to make a living, take out of the common good fund more than he puts into it. Take out of the common good fund more than he puts into it, but less. Rather, it should be instilled into the minds of youth that the welfare of the race is the supreme duty of each, and that the greatest individual happiness is attained only through the self-development and self-expression of the individual along this line. But alas, the enlightened legislatures of some of our sovereign states have forbid the teaching of natural selection to children. The reason given is that it might rob them of their religion. The time is near when the conduct of man in every field of endeavor will be tested by the standard of loyalty and devotion to the common good. Certain gainful occupations injurious to the common welfare are already gone or going. Eliminated as unfit will be the greedy parasites that fasten themselves onto the social body on pretense of aiding some industry to function, and who give little or nothing in return for the public pap that fills their maws to repletion. Eliminating just as nature eliminates the animal that would bring degeneracy to its species. They will be forced to take up a work wherein their services shall equal their pay. The route between the producer and the consumer will be shortened, and the two will stand nearer on a level as viewed from the price of the product. This lesson from the book of nature we have been studying has a universal application. Its truths are applicable in every field and department wherein man and his activities are employed, in private conduct, religion, government, and industry. Cottonmouth break. Alrighty. Of all animals, man is most subject to disease and defect in body and in mind. Sickly or malformed wild animals are so rare as seldom to be seen. This is almost as true of domesticated animals, though epidemics sometimes sweep them off. Animals mentally defective are almost unknown, but man is assailed with 1,000 ailments. Defective organs, functional disorders, chronic invalidism are common. Malformations of body, also of brain, causing idiocy, stupidity, insanity, and crime, are 100 times more frequent in man than in lower animals, wild or domesticated. Why this difference? The answer is easy for anyone familiar with the laws of evolution. The sedulous sifting by natural selection of animals in the wild state has left no sickly or half-witted degenerates to burden the world with a like prodigy. If at rare intervals the law of variation should drop a malformed specimen into nature's sieve, it would be quickly eliminated, along with the great mass of averages. Practically the same is true of domesticated animals, where the watchful eye of man is substituted for nature's. As natural selection is hampered in its operation among domesticated animals by the interference of man, so it is limited on the human plane. There we find virtually no selection, neither natural nor artificial. Hence the degeneracy, physical, mental, moral, both nature and man, in their respective fields of operation, select only a few of the best for repropagating purposes, nature eliminating the rest by death and man by sterilization. But on the human plane, man, acting mercifully toward the individual, mercilessly toward the race, does his best to thwart nature. He prolongs the lives of weaklings, of the malformed from birth, of the deaf and dumb and blind, and of the mentally subnormal. So far, all is well, but he permits these victims of an inferior ancestry to marry and procreate almost without limit. What then can we expect but for the world to be burdened with invalids? Starting to dabble it into the genetics. Runts and the malformed. Cursed with morons, submorons, half-wits, quarter-wits, never heard of a quarter-wit, and predestined criminals. Predestined criminals. And worse for the entire race. This class shades upward by imperceptible degrees into all graduations, mingling its inferior strains with the best. It has always been so, therefore all of us, far more than wild animals, have a mixed ancestry of the good and the less good. Why is it that man has not learned to rid himself of this lower fringe of degeneracy, as is done in the case of every other species of animal? It is mainly because the superstition of an outworn theology has so muddled his brains that he has been unable to see that the laws of nature are as applicable to himself as to all other creatures. He has always fancied himself as occupying a higher plane than that to which nature has her laboratory. So he has always depended on divine laws, not those of carnal nature, to plant his feet on higher ground. And we see the result. Notwithstanding his high intellectual and moral faculties, as a race, he is the most defective animal on earth. What is the remedy? If we would solve this pressing problem, we must apply the laws of nature to man in some such manner as they have always applied to the rest of the animal kingdom. The unfit must be prevented from reproducing its kind. How? There are only two methods: nature's, by bringing about the death of the unfit prospective parent, and man's, the sterilization method. But among the better traits of man, which have been slowly evolved in his age-long struggle, reaching back to an immemorial past, is sympathy, mercy. This bars him from using nature's method of preventing undesirable offspring, nor can he use the sterilization method except in extreme cases. Born criminals, perverts, and other abnormal misfits who persist in indulging their selfish passions, indeterminate of the common good. For such, comprising perhaps 5 to 10% of the race, sterilization is the quickest and surest preventative. Once the milder type of defectives are made to realize the heinous crime of bringing degenerate children into the world, they would in most cases refrain from marriage and procreation. Boy, it's a bit presumptive. Wise, restrictive laws and an awkward public opinion, and an awakened public opinion would do the rest. This angelical system is the only one that promises hope for the salvation of the race. From generation to generation, owing to the fundity of the less fit and their proneness to let nature take her course, their numbers increase, and so too the danger increases of their swamping the filter. And I think we'll stop there. Boy, that one ran right into geneticism and some other weird things. All right, that's the end of part 4 of Evolution Made Plain by John Mason, book number 467 of the Little Blue Book series. Thanks for listening. Join me in part 5.